So tonight's kind of focus is all about a sense of wonder in the early years. And what I really wanted to focus on was the whole area of kind of slow relational pedagogy. So this is something that's really at the forefront at the moment. And my hope for tonight is that I just want to give you something practical and something that you can go back to your settings and bring back to your own provision. So just to give a bit of background, so Lorraine gave a nice introduction there that just covered, I suppose, my interests and my slight obsession with children's books. But I currently work in a nature-based early learning program in County Kerry, and we're very lucky that the program is actually delivered outdoors. So we have a forest kind of riverside nature rich environment. And the whole idea is that we're trying to offer true immersion so that the future educators, so it's a level 5 program, that it prepares them to essentially kind of reposition the outdoors as central to practice, not as something that would be on the periphery. But this isn't new thinking. As you're all aware, Friedrich Frebel, this is the 19th century, Reggio Emilia, that positions the environment as the third educator. So what I think might be new is the sense of urgency around bringing children outdoors. There's recent statistics, some that come from the UK, that actually state that young children are spending less time outdoors than prisoners at the moment. So that's quite a stark kind of a contrast. A few years ago, there was a bit of a debate about kind of the changing terminology. So moving from like early childhood care and education to what we now know as early learning and care. And at the time, there was a bit of a debate about the education side of things versus the care side of things. But what we know is that early learning and care, they're inseparable from one another. What I was hoping to, I suppose, kind of bring forward as part of this is that perhaps outdoor pedagogy too, it should be not optional or peripheral, but it should be indispensable. So it should be inseparable from early learning and care itself. So we have an hour tonight to cover quite a substantial amount. So I'm going to dive straight in. And as I said, if you've got any questions or comments, please pop them into the chat box and we'll have opportunities to discuss throughout. My colleague and I, Maz, or Marianne, she and I developed a resource called Inuit Dulra, Nurturing Early Learning Through Nature and Outdoors. So what I'm touching on tonight will actually be kind of covered in a lot more detail within this kind of card set. So Lorraine is going to share that with you after the session. And we also have a relatively new Instagram page as well. So if anyone wants to give that a follow, it's Nature Pedagogy Ireland. Okay, so with that, I will just kind of give an overview of what we're going to look at in the session. So we're going to have a look at briefly the benefits of nature-based pedagogy. And I'm not going to labor too much time on this point because I'm aware that everyone here is familiar with the benefits of outdoors and nature. So we're really going to focus, I suppose, on the concept of what is slow relational pedagogy and what does that actually look like in practice. We're also going to focus on the art of noticing and how we can hopefully try and develop a sense of awe. That is something that children are really good at, but us as adults in, I suppose, what's a very busy, hustle bustle kind of world, unfortunately, sometimes we don't have that opportunity. So childhood then should also be seen, I suppose, as something that's unhurried. It's a unique time, and that aligns with Aistear. As always, we have to consider documentation. So we're going to touch on as well how you could maybe use this kind of sense of awe or the art of noticing within your documentation in your provision. Some considerations then. So yes, it sounds fantastic, the whole idea of getting outdoors year round, but what are the considerations? We look at policy anchors, and we'll also talk about the myth of the perfect space. So I think sometimes there can be this belief that we have to have everything set up perfect. We have to have vast rolling fields and access to a full forest when that isn't the case. So tonight, hopefully, we'll talk about what you can do kind of starting where you are. We're also going to talk a little bit about our own relationship with nature, because research shows that one of the key indicators or like the key aspects of like quality provision outdoors is about educators' own relationship with nature and their confidence. So we know that if adults aren't happy to be outdoors, they're not going to take children outdoors. So we'll talk about some practical considerations there, hopefully something that managers can take on board that might support their staff as well. Practical solutions, we look at schematic play. So schemas are essentially a repeated pattern of play that children engage in to try and organize their world or to make sense of things. And once you identify them, it's very hard to unsee them. So I'm going to just briefly outline the different types of schematic play and talk about how can we provide for that in the earlier setting. Seasonal ideas will be shared. We'll talk about babies outdoors as well, because unfortunately, even though babies are sensory beings, they are the least likely of all age groups to be brought outside. And I think sometimes it's because we might know necessarily what to do, or there could be concerns about weather, or about seeing maybe the outdoors as a space for physical kind of expression rather than a space to just be. As always, anything that I focus on, I always love to bring in books, because I think books have a place everywhere. And there's a lovely quote, and it says that if you have a garden and a library, you have everything that you need. We'll talk about bringing nature in, and then finally we'll talk a little bit about partnership with parents, because that's something that is really, I suppose, prominent within Aistear, but it's a major part of our practice as well. So just in relation to being in and with Dúilre, Dúilre is the Irish word for nature. And with the new updated Aistear, there is a lot more focus on this. And what it translates to is the elements. So in Irish language, it basically talks about a belonging or a kinship with the living world. And we've probably all heard of that famous quote whereby it's a David Attenborough one, whereby if children, or if we don't kind of understand something or experience it, then we're not going to take care of it. So with early learning and care, we mentioned at the start how it's interdependent, it's interwoven, and care and education is operated in that sense too. So outdoor experiences, they shouldn't be something that's adjacent to the curriculum or something that we go out to. It should be something that is embedded within what we do on a daily basis. There's a difference between taking children then into nature and actually being in and with nature. And there's a lovely resource. It's called the Baby Nini, and it's it's a Frebel project. So if anyone has kind of any interest, you can have a look at that. A really, really fantastic resource. But they're really focusing on bringing babies outdoors. And this research, what it does is it looks at how nature pedagogy isn't simply about bringing children from the indoors to the outdoors. It's about that sense of wondering. How can we support children to notice, to dwell and return? And that idea of dwelling and returning, I think, is really important, because sometimes we can get caught up and we can see these beautiful Pinterest type pictures or Instagram posts which show these novel and new, constantly coming up with different ideas for like tough trays, when in actual fact, returning to something, that's what deepens learning and deepens connection. So we don't have to recreate the wheel every time. And I think that's something that we need to bear in mind. So the benefits of nature-based pedagogy, they're widely known, so I'm not going to discuss this too much, but in terms of outdoor environments, we know that they offer sensory-rich environments, that there's open-ended experiences, they develop our gross and fine motor skills, children's balance, their coordination, problem solving, but also social negotiation, and it's really beneficial for emotional regulation as well. So in terms of Sancestor, we might be familiar with her research around risky play. And we know that exposure to risky play, that fosters resilience, it builds confidence, and it also builds risk assessment skills. And I think sometimes we can be a bit apprehensive or a bit cautious, when in actual fact, what the research shows that if we give children opportunities to risk assess, they develop skills and capabilities in that regard. I recall a number of years ago, I was actually very lucky to go to Norway with Early Childhood Ireland as part of a Lergus visit. And there was a group of us early years educators from Ireland, and there was children climbing trees, and we were all standing there aghast, clutching our pearls, thinking, be careful, when essentially the educators there were so comfortable with it because they trusted the children. And if we look at Aistear now, we know that we see them as confident, as capable. And what we can do is we don't need to completely remove risk, but we can do something called a benefit risk analysis. And in the resource that will be shared with you after this session, there is a little bit of information about how you can go about risk assessment and how you can kind of weigh up that. So the benefit versus the risk. Natural environments, they're fantastic in terms of affording children with sustained and varied play as well, far more than the indoors can ever cater for. And they stimulate imagination and also a kind of conceptual ability. So that's the capacity to hold and manipulate ideas. They promote cooperation, negotiation, and also self-regulation. And one thing that I just hope you might take away from tonight is that the outdoors really lend themselves to the idea of an adult as a co-explorer. So we, us as the teacher or the facilitator, we don't need to know everything. We don't have to know about all the different types of trees and plants and species. And I think sometimes if we think about, nature-based pedagogy, we feel that we have to almost be like, an ecologist, when in actual fact, we can also wander with the children so we can explore together. Okay, apologies, the slide is not clicking on there. Okay, so there just seems to be an issue with this. Going to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So slow relational pedagogy. So you mentioned this at the start. So slow pedagogy, it's not about doing less. What it is about, it's about being fully present and about genuine encounters. So it asks us to try to resist the pressure to fill or to direct or to produce something, and instead to try and follow. So follow the children's lead, to wait and to wander alongside children. And that can be difficult sometimes because I think as we get older, we're less likely to kind of have that slow pace and that sense of awe and that sense of wonder. So what does this look like in practice? So if we think about it, if we see children exploring, before we intervene, observe and see what the child is doing. You can lower yourself to the child's level. That's nothing new. But as well as physically, think about relationally as well. Narrate without redirecting. So you don't constantly have to add or extend. Sometimes our role is essentially to narrate what we observe. So you're watching the worm move. You return to the same outdoor spaces repeatedly. So I mentioned this earlier about how we don't have to have the constant novel experiences. By returning to the same space and activities, that deepens meaning, and it also deepens communication and also connection as well. In terms of resist asking questions like, what are you making? Or try, what are you noticing instead? Allow silence as well to be generative. So it's not something that we have to fill. And you can document the journey, not just the destination. So things like transient art, which is something that only lasts for a mere few minutes, or it could be a few hours before the breeze takes it away. You can take photos. Not everything needs to be displayed or held onto. And also embrace incompletion. So unfinished projects as well, and open-ended exploration, they are evidence of learning. I brought my own little girls to a local kind of a forest kind of parent and toddler group. And one thing that I loved was the children returned to the space each week. And 1 week, one group had started digging a hole in the ground. And she didn't cover it up, she left it. And the next group that came, they decided to lay planks across it. And the next group added something else to it. So it was an ongoing kind of project, if you will. In terms of the art of noticing, then, noticing is a skill and it's a practice. It's something that we have to take time to actually kind of engage. So as adults, we often hurry, whereas if you think about children, they slow down and they engage fully with the environment beyond a casual glance. So as you well know, if you've ever tried to go on a walk with children, they stop, they look at everything, they notice the small things. And that's the beauty, I think, of working with children, is it makes us slow down and it makes us see the world through the eyes of a child, which is quite a magical thing. Early childhood, it is a time of being as well as a time of becoming. So we don't need to rush children. And I think that unhurried sense is really, really important here. So we're not trying to prepare children for school. We're acknowledging that this period is actually really important and unique and is something to be valued. And it's something where children enjoy and they learn from the experiences as they naturally unfold. So each child develops differently. We know that development is normative. So in terms of looking at how children develop, we need to respect individual pace, individual interests, and individual strengths as well. And the Aistear framework recognizes that. So it talks about each state of childhood in its own right. So we don't view it as preparation for later education. This philosophy.
As your mute.
Someone coming in there? No? Okay. So this philosophy can be adopted by adults. So if we slow down enough, we can also look, we can notice, and we can wonder alongside the children. So childhood should be unhurried. It's a distinct and unique period, and we have a need to slow down alongside the children. So what does the art of noticing look like in practice? So it's us bending down. Look, do you see what I see? Watching a child, nobody is hurrying them. The snail that they're observing, that is part of the curriculum. A group of children returning to the same tree every week, they notice difference. So they notice that the buds are opening, or that the leaves have changed, that there's a hole in the bark that wasn't there before. Again, with my children, when they attended one of these forest school sessions, she had a bat outside with tadpoles, and each week we returned, the first thing that they'd do is they'd rush over to observe any changes. So when it turns, say, into a froglet, when it turned into a frog, an educator, then we can narrate what we see as well without interpreting. So I noticed that the worm is moving towards the damp earth. Children, they carry magnifying glasses as standard outdoor equipment. And I think that's something that we could definitely all introduce to our outdoor settings. Now, I know some of us will have access to maybe kind of storage outdoors or whatever it might be, or we might have large scale outdoor spaces. But something that I personally love is the idea of an investigator kit. So you could have, if you don't have outdoor space where you can kind of store things continuously, that you might have a little kit. It could be a little suitcase. It could be one of the plastic boxes, and in that you could have your notebooks, your pens, your magnifying glasses, your pooter. That might bring back memories of some of you maybe from like Killarney National Park, where you're catching the bugs respectfully, of course, observing them before releasing them again. So in terms of a sense of awe, children have an innate desire to investigate. They're curious, they're full of a sense of wonder. And as adults, our role involves fostering that sense of wonder. So we don't need to answer every question. We don't have to have all the answers. And I think that's really important, that we can wonder alongside the children. And that is the whole idea of being a co-explorer or a co-investigator. So this is a common activity that you'd see in forest schools. It's I see, I think, I wonder. And the observation frame that you can see, it's just made out of a simple card, but you could do it with a picture frame. You could get the children to create their own frames. I see, this part is basically pure observation. You're describing what you see, what is directly visible. The I think then is your inference. So what you think is happening, or what could explain this, or I wonder, that's the curiosity. So questions that the child cannot yet answer. So recently, some children were in the town park in Clorglen. It's a beautiful place if anyone ever gets a chance to visit there. It's open to the public. And some of the children were there, and there was a tree stump, but it was quite curious looking. It almost looked like Stickman. So it was, I see a tree stump. I think it might be Stickman. I wonder what he is doing in Clorglen Town Park. So the I see, I think, I wonder is something that we can practice with children. And tonight, what I want you to do is I want to invite you just to take a moment, okay, just to kind of have that sense of wonder or that sense of awe. And I want you to take a look at this random image that I took locally. And in the chat box, I want you to just tell me, what do you see, what you think, and what you wonder? And try and really tap into that childlike kind of view of seeing the world. That's the thing about kind of childhood, is the curiosity. So I actually came across this tree when I was out for a walk with my children. And like that, oh, I see a hole in the tree. I think fairies might live there. I wonder what they're called. So it's just magic how children can take something so simple and really lean into it. And one person mentioned about, oh, it looks like an ear, and I wonder, could it hear us? And there's a fantastic book actually, and it just brought it to mind, is I Hear You Forest. And it just made me think of one thing we got some of our students on the nature-based program to do, and they of course thought we were mad. But we read I Hear You Forest, and we brought stethoscopes. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but at certain times of the year, if you put a stethoscope up to the tree, you can hear the water. So you can actually hear the life in the tree. So it's something really interesting to do with children. Now, obviously, if someone comes across you and you're listening to a tree with a stethoscope, you might look a bit mad, but that's all part of it. So the whole idea of the adult then as a co-explorer, you just really took part in that. So again, I appreciate that. It's all about learning alongside the children. So showing genuine curiosity and interest in their ideas. And you don't have to have the answers, as we said. Follow the child's lead. Use their questions, their interests, and their investigations as a starting point for learning. So it really ties in with that idea of the emergent curriculum. Observing carefully. So before we intervene, allow the children time to think, to explore, to try and solve the problems independently. So again, scaffolding, just offering the right level of support. Open-ended questions. So I wonder what will happen if, or how could we find out? And giving it over to the children rather than answering immediately for them. Apologies, I skipped ahead there. Extending children's learning, so by providing resources, encouragement, and gentle prompts instead of us trying to direct the activity. So we are kind of facilitators rather than leading it. Valuing children's theories or their ideas. Again, this links back to Aistear, so the whole idea of seeing them as competent and agentic and someone whose perspectives matter. So in this way, we are essentially a partner in inquiry. We're discovering with the children. We are not acting as the sole expert. We don't have to have all of the answers. And I think there's comfort in that as well, because even though I love nature-based pedagogy and I work on a program like that, I still don't have all the answers. I don't know the name of every tree or every plant. And I'm learning and discovering with the students often as well. So this kind of aligns with, as we said, Aistear in terms of seeing children as agentic, competent, confident, and reflective. But as adults, it also kind of looks at our role and the whole kind of area of slow responsive pedagogy, warm relationships, listening deeply to the children's voices and creating rich opportunities for them to play, for inquiry, and also for that shared learning. And that is where learning develops. It's that meaningful interaction between children and adults. So if we think back to like a very basic theory like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have the kind of basic needs at the bottom, children need to feel safe and secure before they can learn, before they can reach that kind of self-actualization at the top. As always, something that we do have to be mindful of is noticing as part of like documentation. So Aistear's updated kind of framework looks at the noticing and nurturing cycle. So this ties in really nicely with this whole sense of noticing and awe. And nature journals can be a really fantastic way of doing this, whereby children can draw or photograph something that they notice. I think children capturing images is really, really interesting because you get to see from the child's perspective. And I'll come to it later, but there's a fantastic cheap resource. It's called a microscopic camera. So you can actually zoom in on things, see it up close, but then you can actually take a picture and you can upload that and print them off and display those like a wonder wall. And you can have the children's questions alongside it. So something like that, I see, I think, I wonder, that could be a prompt. So maybe yourself or one of your fellow educators are out, and now that you have this lens of looking through the eyes of a child, you might notice interesting things or curious things. The children might notice them on a nature walk, and you could take pictures and have those prompts in your setting. Something that I did previously was instead of say like a kind of a notice board, I had a willow trellis, and with the willow trellis I kind of had just little clips, little pegs where we could hang up like questions or pictures or discoveries. And then underneath it, we had like biodiversity swatch cards. And I'll give you examples of all of these types of things in a while and where you can access them, so that the children could basically use it almost like an investigation station. So they could go, and this might ignite a question or curiosity. And then by having an array of like different books that can support and extend learning as well. In terms of then I suppose photos speak 1,000 words. So this picture is an example of a kind of a nature-based outing that myself and my colleague facilitated in an earlier setting. So we got our students on the nature-based program to organize an outdoor session for a local preschool where we could show them what they could do in their space. And as part of it, we really wanted to kind of promote that whole kind of sense of curiosity, slow responsive pedagogy. So it wasn't a series of activity, and kind of tick the box, lots of transitions. There was invitations and the children could kind of follow their lead. And we wanted to show the students that that was essentially what their role was. It was to facilitate, to follow the child's curiosity. And I love this picture because you can see the children, they found a worm, they're looking through the magnifying glass, they have their handmade binoculars there, and they're exploring. And it was a really, really rich learning opportunity. In terms
Exactly.
of access to outdoors, it was really interesting that some of your settings, you mentioned that you might have a relatively small outdoor space, or some of you have quite a vast outdoor space. And according to Early Childhood Ireland conference proceedings back in 2023, that as of summer 2022, that there was 57 registered early year services that have an outdoor kind of service. 17 of those fully outdoors, and then 40 of those are substantially outdoors. But what we know is that even though that 97% of early year settings say that they have access to some outdoor space, that access doesn't necessarily mean utilization. So what we need to do, I suppose, is kind of look at what we have and try and support educators to confidently, safely, and creatively utilize whatever space you have, whether that be an expansive natural space or if it's an urban space. So the picture there, I'm very lucky in that that is actually my outdoor classroom in Kerry College. So I'm very lucky to work there. Now that looks like a beautiful sunny day, but be rest assured that we're out there also in the rain as well and the wind. So policy anchors, I won't dip into this too much because again, we're coming to the end of the session and I want to share some of the practicalities. But Aistear, again, all 4 themes link to kind of outdoors. DULRA is really, really central to kind of quality early learning and care. If we look at Shielta, both standard 6 and standard 8 focus on the whole kind of environment and how it should be stimulating, developmentally appropriate, and that the outdoor learning should be seen as embedded in practice and not simply an add-on. The childcare regulations then and the roof is the sky is a really, really useful resource because what it does is it goes beyond the compliance. Outdoor time, it's a core pedagogical commitment. And I think sometimes we can be a bit apprehensive or a bit kind of worried about how do we offer that? How do we ensure it's safe? And that's where the benefit risk analysis comes into it. First 5 as well, so looks at the whole kind of area of play, well-being, connection with nature, as well as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. While it doesn't explicitly give children a right to outdoors, it does give children a right to play and leisure. But Article 29 does make a reference to a right to an education that develops respect for the natural environment. And I mentioned that David Attenborough quote at the beginning. So starting where you are. So the myth of the outdoor space, that is one of the most persistent myths. We don't need a vast outdoor space with an expensive mud kitchen. We don't need to have a water wall, a generous budget. So on this slide, I've just put an example of some things that you could offer. And in the images in the slides, you can see there, you mightn't have an area for digging or planting, a wheelbarrow with some compost, and the little baby in that's my youngest there, so she's not even yet 18 months, and she had a great time digging away in the wheelbarrow. The polythyrene tubs that you get like in Aldi, Lidl, you get them in any hardware shop, gardening store, they are fantastic, especially if your service doesn't have maybe an area to store things or you have to bring things in and out constantly. So they can be great for filling with water. Go to your local charity shop. So in that image, you can see like the little metal teapots. They are one of the best things that I've ever purchased and ever used in early years. One little girl, she could spend a whole hour and a half literally just pouring the water, and that kind of ties to the schematic play as well. So our own relationship with nature, I think it's really important that we reflect on our kind of relationship and how we see things, because what research shows is that if educators have a positive and a confident relationship with the outdoors, they are far more likely to provide rich and sustained experiences for our young children, and that's no surprise. But what that does make us consider is if we are managers in outdoor settings, oftentimes we think about the waterproof suits for children, but what about the staff? So we have to make sure that staff are comfortable, that the educators also have appropriate clothing. And I don't merely mean a rain jacket. So if it is like suitable waterproof pants or boots, so that they are comfortable being outdoors, so they can facilitate that session for the children. Just an idea, if you're talking about that kind of freedom to go indoors and outdoors, one consideration you could have is freezer curtain. So something like a heavy duty PVC curtain, it would be available like in most kind of catering suppliers. It's a fraction of the cost of a canopy, but it's a game changer in terms of if you want that free flow access, keep out the wind, the rain, and it's keeping the temperature inside in the building relatively stable. So schematic play then. So with schematic play, a schema is a repeated pattern of behavior. So it's something that children engage in. And it's how they understand the world. So once you see schemas at work, it's very hard to unsee them, because children, they essentially are drawn to this. It's like an innate thing that they have. And outdoor experiences and environments, they have an abundance of natural materials, space. There's a resistance to tidiness as well. So that really lends itself to schematic play. So within the kind of resource that Lorraine is going to share with you after, I actually give a couple of examples. So for the different kind of areas. So transporting. Children love to transport things from one place to another. So providing them with wheelbarrows or buckets or natural materials, stones or rocks, or it could be pine cones, acorns, whatever, that they can transfer from one place to another. The trajectory schema is one that we're quite familiar with. So think the baby in the high chair throwing things down. So babies and young children, they like to explore that trajectory. So throwing, dropping, pouring, rolling. So the pouring, as I said, the metal teapots, and you might have your polythyrene bucket. You could have a mud kitchen. You could have a water wall. It can be made out of a simple pallet and just some guttering. Rotation, so that's whereby they like to spin. So even sticks in water. Enveloping, so that's where you like to cover objects. So things like fabric. So den making can be a really, really good one for that. Children love a sense of feeling like they're hidden. And if you look at Sancestor and risky play, that kind of sense of being unseen is really kind of attractive to children. Obviously, we want to see them, but they want to feel like they can't be seen. Connecting, so that's joining things together, taking them apart. So nature is fantastic and really affords that type of play. Positioning, so that's whereby you line things up. And then transforming. A mud kitchen is a dream for the transforming schema, or just a simple bucket. Mud painting, mud and water, mix it together, and that's your transforming schema. So I won't go through all of these slides, because again, I'm sure that you've all got things to do this evening, but you can go back through these, and it just gives you a couple of examples of things you might do in the spring. So you can see an example of a nature portrait. We have journey sticks, nature bracelets in springtime. In summer, shadow exploration. The top image there is hapazome. So it's basically whereby you have your mallet, and the children have, that's an old bed sheet. You lay down your materials, cover it over, and you hammer it, and they can make flags. The bottom image then is orienteering. So we adapted the activity with images of the animals, and the children had to find the kites around the yard, and then they could stamp the various animals when they found them. In autumn, so things like leaf scavenger hunts, blackberry picking and painting, leaf printing. Clay is a fantastic one, and clay is actually brilliant to do with babies as well. Then in terms of winter, ice sculptures, bird feeders. So if you look at Birdwatch Ireland, they have some fantastic guidance as well. Babies outdoors. So babies are sensory beings, as we mentioned. They are the least likely group to be taken outdoors, but the research is clear. Even a brief period outdoors has immeasurable positive effects on babies' alertness, their engagement, but also their emotional regulation. And here are just some ideas for non-mobile babies, and also for mobile babies and toddlers. And again, these examples are going to be included in the resource that will be shared with you after this session. Enjoying books outdoors. So enjoying books outdoors, I think books should be enjoyed everywhere, because what they do is they create an authentic connection between the stories and the environment. If I'm reading a book about birds or insects or weather or plants, I can immediately observe that and investigate what I'm seeing in the outdoors. It promotes a sense of enjoyment of reading. It supports language development. It encourages curiosity. It supports well-being, and it develops a connection as well with the outdoors. And if we think how it links to Aistear, playful, meaningful learning, it emerges from the children's interests. They can extend their play. So they might make a den, or maybe it might be the Gruffalo, or it might be something that they've read, and they can act that out in their play. And it also is relational pedagogy. So adults sharing stories, conversations, and discoveries alongside the children. So we're nearly there. So bringing nature in then. So nature belongs in every part of the day. Even if we have very limited access maybe to outdoor spaces, the natural world can be brought inside through materials, images, sounds, and also living things. So some of you mentioned bringing lambs and different animals to your setting. So if you don't have a locally friendly farmer who will bring a sheep or a lamb to your setting, there are some simple things you can do. So projecting images on the wall or the floor or the ceiling can be really effective. You could have even tied into a story. So for example, if you were talking about the Gruffalo, you could make a picture of the woodlands, for example. So it's almost like an immersive experience. I mentioned about these handheld microscope cameras. They're fantastic. My students had great crack looking at their split ends and everything with them. So you can do is really zoom in, you can see everything, and you can actually take pictures, print those off, display them. Nature reference books, Biodiversity Ireland, go to their website. They have swatch ladybirds, loads of different things, and they're brilliant for the children. They can bring them outside, you can use them inside. Treasure baskets, I shared a resource there in the chat, and Lorraine is going to send it on after. So from the Nurturing Skills Aistear Shield to Practice Guide, they have a great resource that explains how to use treasure baskets. Partnership with parents. So again, I know sometimes there can be concerns that they're going to be cold, they're going to be wet, getting dirty, that it's not going to be good for them, they'll get sick. But families are the most important people in a child's life. So if we can understand and share the ethos behind the nature-based practice, children's experiences can be enriched in both the home and the setting. And partnership, it's not about persuasion, it's about a genuine, respectful dialogue. So we need to try and communicate the why. So share the evidence warmly. Tell them how outdoor play supports every domain of development. Explain that nature-based learning, it's a daily pedagogical commitment. It's not a reward for fine weather. Display photographs of the children engaged outdoors with a short caption that explains the learning. And something that you could do is, if you want to have that kind of take home, you can share a simple take home activity each season. The nature detectives have a brilliant website. So it could be like leaf collection walks, cloud watch, puddle investigation. You could pick an activity and share that with families, and then display that learning and that shared practice. And share photos, share observations, and also celebrate muddy children warmly at collection time. So a messy child, that is exactly what we want to see. So this is the open educational resource that I kind of mentioned a few times throughout the presentation. It will be shared with you after, but it goes into everything we discussed tonight and far more. So just thank you for bearing with me. I know we've gone slightly over on time. So just to finish off, something that you can take away and something that you can implement next week. If you'd like to share that in the chat box, or if you have any other questions, I'm happy to kind of stay around and answer those. And thanks again for joining me this evening.